My name's Paul Roger Paul Rogers. Um, I kind of like to start this off with in the year 1997. Um, it's a day that was June 8th to be specific, 1997. That's when my life and some of my friends and close family members' life changed pretty big. Um, the neighborhood that we had was like a lot of different neighborhoods growing up. You have your people, and one of them, his name was Bruce, and he was just one of those kids that everybody wanted to be around, everybody liked, and just man, I want to be like that guy, like that kid. Well, he ended up moving away with his dad for a couple of years, and we had word that he was going to be coming back for the summer. And so me and a couple other friends, we was just tickled to death that we was going to see him again. And the day that he came back, we all and back then, which I know kids ride their bikes now, but it's nothing like what it is back in the day. Like we didn't have cell phones, the iPads, and the best way to know where all the kids were at, look for all the bikes in the front yard. Um, but whenever Bruce got back, he wanted to ride his bike down. We call it Flat Creek, where I'm from. And to get to Flat Creek, it wasn't the safest, you know, definitely for kids to be riding. I mean, we made that trip plenty of times, with for most of the time without our parents' permission, and I think the parents knew that we was going to ride down there, and but we went down there and went off the rope swing and swam in the creek, and that's what Bruce wanted to do, and it was a wonderful time. But right after we left, that's when the accident happened. He got hit by a car, and so me, my brother, and another friend, TJ, was all there, and TJ was cousins through marriage with Bruce. But we all seen the accident, um, and it's just one of those things that I feel like how they explain in movies is just everything stops. Everything just slows down, and you can see a little bug slowly fly by, and just that that accident just it was just scored in my brain every day that I woke up from that point to now. I think about it, and it's just I feel like now it's a little bit different, but I feel like my childhood ended at age of 12. I mean, I turned 13 later that year, but my childhood ended on that day, and and maybe a year or so later, I had there's a couple of my friends that uh that they want me on what a friend should do and just kind of get me out to just to show me that life will continue, and and I was lucky enough to have friends like that just to be supportive of me, and the problems I had. I suffered from that for many years, and I honestly used that as excuses as too. It's like, oh, feel sorry for me. You know, I watched a friend get hit by a car in front of and I just but um, I mean that's when it. I mean, like I said, my childhood ended, and I had a lot of good friends growing up, and it's been. I can say I'm a pretty blessed person to have those friends growing up, and very supportive and whatnot, but I still had my issues, and I didn't get to until I was a little bit older, and I saw a doctor, and he told me, he's like, you have PTSD, and I'm like, that's, from what I heard from PTSD, that's for people in the military, and I was like, I don't deserve to use that term. It's just because what they went through, I feel like it's a lot different when I went through, but um, it I always had always struggled with mental illness, issues and whatnot, a lot of my friends has heard, a lot of my stories growing up, and I've cried and shed tears so many times, and it's been, you know, I'm a pretty grateful person, I just didn't see that, and but I had issues with, my dad never around, and even though I forgave him, you know, I grew up with my friends' family, their dads being my dads, and I had a wonderful mom that she worked her butt off, and I wouldn't trade her for no one, what I'm saying? Like, she was an awesome mom, but she had her issues too with her raising with her family, and she tried her best to be emotionally there for me, but I don't think anybody could really fix me, At the time, I thought no, I couldn't be fixed. But as growing up, I just, I well, in that time, I kind of leaned in a lot of movies, you know, good movies, bad movies, scary movies, a lot of comedy movies. I feel like I am put myself in that and I escaped reality, and that's how I felt like I got by a lot of my years. But I did a lot of my life. I feel like fake smiles, I figured, well, if I can make somebody laugh, put a smile on their face, that's gonna make me feel better. And it always did, but it never fulfilled me to, it always, I feel like always there's always something missing. And uh, I mean, the older I got, as you can tell, I mean, I got tattoos everywhere. I mean, I got them over my head, I mean, everywhere. And, a lot of my family and friends, they kind of at first, like, why is he doing this? And believe it or not, I am the biggest baby you've ever seen in your life. Um, but I feel like getting these tattoos, every second of ever I got a tattoo, it all hurt, but it helped me just to, you know, escape even more. I thought about suicide so much, so many times. Well, I can do it this way, I can do it that way. Um, and I never could do it just because, like, I felt like, you know, maybe there's something spiritually stopping me from doing it. But I, I just think that, the way I looked at it is if I do that, is that going to fix my suffering? No, it's going to make the people who love me and the people who know me that they're going to suffer for something my selfish want, what I wanted, and I never could do it. Now I've tried a few times, and and whenever I lived in Sedalia, where I'm from, um, I was pretty much, partying, and I was a couch hopper, go to this friend's house, that friend's house, and didn't have my stuff together, and then I left Sedalia and moved up to Kansas City, and it was around tax season. I had tax money, and I was like, well, this is time for me to figure life out, and it's time for me to grow up. And so that's what I did. I moved up here, and I ended up working at a tattoo shop, and started from the opening the shop, the front desk person, cleaning or whatever. Then luckily they trained me how to pierce. I've always wanted to pierce, and I tried it in Sedalia, but it wasn't professionally, and I always wanted to learn how to pierce the right way. So I found a good shop that they trained me right, and just started just worked my way up. And I always hate giving myself credit, like I'm the best or whatever. I wasn't. I most certainly was not the best piercer, but I gave it my all. And that's the first thing in my life, as a career wise, that I jumped in, and worked my butt off and this and that, and end up making good decent money. And I thought, well, I grew up poor, and like the story goes, you grew up poor, you get some money, you start buying stuff you really don't need. I had a bunch of different cars and nice house and all kinds of stuff, and it just didn't fix anything. But when I moved up there, I knew where I was moving, that it wasn't really the safest place to live. And so I already had a 12 gauge shotgun. Ended up buying like an AR-15, and never shot shotgun once. Maybe shot the AR one day at shooting range, and that's it. And I ended up selling it before I left, just because I'm not really a gun person. But there's when I was up in Kansas City, one of my friends. I mean, he was a friend through a friend. He put on uh, Facebook Marketplace. It was a 38 revolver, like a basic replica, nothing. It's like the old police guns you see, and the suicide always was in the thought of my head, and I was like, I don't need this gun, like, but this would be a great gun to get to kill myself. I've seen a lot of movies where you put one bullet in the chamber, you spin it. I think they call it Russian roulette. I was like, that's a good way to go, at the time. And I tried, I tried that two different times when I lived in the city. It just, you know, and both times the bullet wasn't ready to, come out what I thought it was. But I've always had that gun, and my life's kind of like a roller coaster. Good times and bad times, and I got tired of the city life, and I missed my family and friends. When I was up in the city, I was mad at my friends and some of my family, because when I lived up in the city, I drove back, quite a bit to see them, hang out with them, and always got told is like, oh, we need to come up and see you. I'm like, yeah, of course. There's so much stuff we can do. Y'all can come stay with me. We party up here, blah blah, and 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 hardly anybody came up. There was a few people that came up, and so I'm thinking like, well, why do I even care that, you know, I love my mom, but she never came up once to see me, and I just wanted to show these people, I'm like, hey, look what I got, but it was all material things, stuff that I really didn't, now that I see it, don't really matter. But I mean, the whole time I was up in the city, pretty much I was, partying, drinking. I've always been a weed smoker. I don't do anything now, but I was doing a lot of cocaine at the time. And just didn't really care about anything. Only thing I really cared about was working at a tattoo shop, doing piercings and stacking that money up. You know what I'm saying? And um, I mean, I remember one time I started saving ones, fives, and tens, just for why not, and see how much I can get. And I remember I had $1,000 in ones, and one of my buddies came up, and he's one of those friends that is just he was one of the friends that actually came up and visited me a lot, and he always said he was like a free spirit, and whatever, but he was having hard times with money, whatever, and he didn't ask for it, but I was like, have you ever seen what $1,000 ones look like? And he's like, no. So I had some balled up already, so I'm like, there you go. And he's like, that's cool. I'm like, well, that's yours now, and it wasn't one of those deals like, it just wasn't alone. It was just wasn't feeling sorry for him, If he was in my shoes, he'll do the same thing, But you know, I like gathering all that money up was just pointless, Now I see life different, whatever. But um, I got tired of living that type of lifestyle. So I was like, you know what, I need to go back home, see family and friends, and but living in Kansas City, even when I moved back home, I've always been really good at burning bridges. It's kind of like feel sorry for Paul. It's another little sad story for Paul. This and that, blah blah, and I've always been a loner. Like my friends, we have always had a big friend group. But they always called me the lone wolf. I'm horrible but texting, horrible but calling. You can call and text me, and I'll look right at it and be like, that ain't happening. And but I always blame them. It's like, well, how come they ain't talking to me? Well, how come they don't want to hang out with me, and I don't get invited to their parties or just to hang out and this and that. Well, it's my own self doing. So um, where did I go? Sorry. You're doing great. You're doing great. Always had issues, and always wanted, always say, I don't care about the attention, but I did, and once I was back at home, um, I had friends and this and that, but it got to the point where I'm like, you know what, I'm not, I started cleaning my life up and didn't want to party and stuff, and never kind of quit drinking and doing the other bad stuff. I just kind of just smoked weed, but it's just my life wasn't going anywhere, and I was just slowly just losing family members and friends left and right, and uh, and I remember, I always said that I'm just not made to ever get married. I'm I couldn't pay a girl to love me, what I'm saying, with the issues I had, and jumped on the dating site, and maybe I did it for the wrong reasons, for hookups or whatever. But I never really did hookups. It's just whatever. But ended up meeting this girl or whatever, and on her her profile says she's a teacher. I'm like, there's no chance, absolutely no chance that she's going to be interested in a guy like me. Someone who barely has tattoos, teaches elementary, versus a guy like me, who barely got through elementary. Um, we went up, talking or whatever, and set up a date, and went out to eat, and it went wonderful. What I'm saying? It's just wonderful person. I'm like, I felt like she really enjoyed her time. I enjoyed my time, but like my past, experience with like that, it's just the first date always goes good. And I didn't think that she could actually love a person like me. Well, I remember coming at the time. I was staying with one of my buddies, and I went home. I was staying with him, and he went back to the house, and he's like, "How'd it go?" And he's like, "Man, I'm gonna marry that girl." And like, they're just, I don't think she likes me, like that, but I'm gonna give it a try, and and I truly feel like this girl was sent to help me to, get me to the point where I'm at right now. I mean, she was involved in the church life, and like I told her, it was like that. Don't even try, and like because she sat me down and asked me what my issues was, and I told her. I mean, I didn't tell her everything, but I'll tell you is this. I you know I used to tell people I'm not a religious person. If you want to believe in them, that's fine. But uh, damn, damn him, for taking uh, Bruce from me. For I feel like he that played a role in why my dad didn't love me. You know, I know he loved me. He just just was different. I don't have any hatred for him, but I blame him for my dad not being there. When I got older, I wanted kids. even though I wasn't really positioned to be a good father, but like whenever we were kids, they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, I want to be a policeman. I want to be a fireman. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a dad. I want to be a dad. Just to hear someone like you have a kid call me, "Hey, Dad," just I've always wanted to hear that. I never got to hear that ever in my life, and maybe it will happen in the future, but I've always wanted that, and I never got to hear that. So that was the biggest thing I blame God for. It's like, how dare you, you not let me have kids? I cursed his name. All kinds of things. But I always told people on the outside, hey, if you want to believe in him, that's your choice. I don't believe in him. Never will. And boy, was I wrong. Um, Bless my wife's heart. She never pressured me. She never got mad. I mean, there when we was first together, every Sunday she would, hey, you want to come to church? And I'm like, nope, ain't happening. With her, I learned to be respectful. I had my issues with God, but I kept my mouth closed, just be respectful to her because you know, she loves him. And I went to church every few often, times with her, whatever. But the church that she goes to, and I mean, wonderful people, but it's just my selfish, problems I had that these people were very nice to me, but always found issues that, well, this is why I told you, this is why I shouldn't go, and it could be somebody didn't hold the door for me, what I'm saying? Like, I told you, that's I don't belong in church, that guy saw me coming, he saw my tattoos, and he didn't hold the door for me, like I told you, this is why I don't come to church, and I always found issues why I don't belong in church, there's been one time I felt like that I wasn't wrong, but it really crushed me. It was when I lived in the city. I see a lot of different people come in, and a lot of people. I remember like two or three people say, "Hey, can I pray for you?" Absolutely, pray for me. It's like I'll be respectful, but I didn't tell them. It's like, yeah, I don't believe in your God, It's like, but you can pray for me if you want. If you want to waste your time, sure, whatever. And a lot of people's like, hey, it's like, come to my church, And I'm like, have you looked at me? I'm like, I don't belong in church. And and this one lady, she brought her niece up to get a piercing, and this lady told me, she's like, well, come to my church. There's ex people who've been in prison, ex bikers that have tattoos. And she's like, yeah, they don't have many tattoos as you, but they have tattoos. But come on up. We love everybody. I'm like, you know what? Write the address down. I'll come. I'll come see you. And she wrote her address down for the church. And I came up that church on Sunday, and I was late. I'm late to everything, But I remember walking up, and I had pants, had a long sleeve shirt on. I was trying to be respectful, and I remember walking up, and went to reach for the door, and the lady kind of saw me coming, and she kind of opened the door and kind of pops her head out. Can I help you? I'm like, is this the door we come in for service? And she's like, what are you trying to do? I'm like, and I'm kind of looking around like uh, I don't know. I mean, I got invited to this church, and he said, well, what's her name? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, here's the address she wrote down, and uh, and the whole time her head's popped out, and I'm standing at the door, and she's like, "Are you're not a member, are you?" I'm like, "No," and I'm like, "Well, can I come in?" She's like, "No," and she told me no. She told me no, and I was like, "Okay." I walked away, and I'm just like, "See, I'm not meant to come to church. I'm not I don't regret these tattoos. You know, there's a lot of tattoos that I should have never got, but I don't regret a single one of them. That's my past life. It's something I could look back and, be like, hey, I remember this time. I was happy this time. I was upset this time. I was drunk at this time. Regardless what the time it is, but I don't regret none of these tattoos. I know what I signed up for. I know some people, it is what it is. I just get judged. I mean, I don't see no tattoos on you, and I'm sure you can still get judged. You know what I'm saying? It's just the world we live in. But I made an attempt to go to church, and I got pushed away because maybe that lady felt unsafe because of what I look like. But then I knew right then and there that good luck to ever get me in a church. It ain't happening. You're gonna have to tie me up and drag me in to get me in church. It ain't happening. But that's But then when I went in Sedalia with my wife, go fast forward a little bit. I went to church a few times with her, and like I said, I always found reasons why I shouldn't be there. Like, oh, this and that, blah blah, and and my wife never got mad. Never got mad. I'm serious. She get upset sometimes 'cause I wasn't trying. Well, I don't know what she saw in me, but we ended up getting married. Um, and what's crazy about that is just I remember joking with my friends growing up. It's like I'm like, hey, I'm gonna have to plan my own surprise birthday party. I always hinted at them. It's like, hey, I want to. That'd be cool. A surprise birthday party. I always joked with them. I was like, I'm gonna have to plan my own surprise birthday party. Well, I thought, how am I gonna propose my wife? Well, I tricked her. I mean, it was my idea, but like I pretty much planned my own surprise birthday party, but made her feel like that she did it so I can use that time to propose to her. And so that's how I proposed to her at my surprise birthday party. It's it's amazing, and I can just see, I kind of feel this, my life slowly kind of getting there. I had, sometimes 10 steps forward, 5 steps back, but with her, it just, I can feel it, I need to stop resisting so much and just kind of let it happen. Well, I talked her into having our wedding on April Fool Day, April Fool's Day, April 1st. You know, which I think is pretty awesome, by the way. Um, but when we got married, I promised her that I would go to church at least once a month, and we got married April 1st, 2023. Versus now, I probably came, before all this is happening, I probably went to church probably less than a handful of times. So I broke her that promise from the very beginning. But we, she has bad credit. I got bad credit. We've always wanted to buy a house, and just, you know, I'd never saved money, and she didn't either. And so we was, renting, staying with her mom, bless her heart, and her mom's a nice lady, but it was just, I don't see how anybody can live with their mother-in-law, nice lady. But we ended up finding a house. Um, it's not the best house. We found something that we can buy, so we jumped into it, and it's in the town of Smithton. She teaches at that school, and so that was ideal for her, which is ideal for me. If you're married, people will know this: is a happy wife, happy life. And so we were doing that, but it just got to a point where I was missing work a lot, getting sick, and I was losing friend after friend. I was like, man, what's the deal? It's going back to poor Paul. And like feel sorry for Paul, and like I had a lot of issues with my family. I got a really large family, and I explain to people what my family is. A lot of them, they're older and kind of they squashed their problems, but it was like the Hatfields and McCoys without the guns. If you know the history of the Hatfields and McCoys, two different families, they used to fight to the death, like with guns and stuff way back in the day, you know. But our family used to just, you know, pick a side without the guns, you know. And one of my aunts that um, we ended up having issues, I had issues with, you know, I hated her. I mean, I just had, you know what, she's one of the top of the list that I want to hate to the day I die, you know. Well, she ended up getting cancer and ended up being terminal. I mean, she's still here, but she don't have that much time left. And you know, my mom, you know, you know, tell me it's like, well, just just come say hi to her, blah blah. And you know, I saw her once or twice, and hey, sorry, you know, wish you the best. You know, as soon as she went away, I was like, I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. A lot of the family took her to the beach. She'd never seen the beach before, and me and my wife was invited, and I'm like, I ain't going to that. I don't care. I hate her. I don't care. The hatred I had for her, the hatred I had in my body, in my heart was just, it was just, it was, I don't know. Whenever I have like panic attacks, I don't know if anybody has it's like me. It's like being in a room and it's just like this wall's coming in, this wall's coming in, and the ceiling, the floor, and just everything is just getting tighter and tighter. And that's why it was getting to the point where I just couldn't breathe. It was my anger, you know. And I got to the point where, you know, like, why do I hate her? Like she's about to die, you know. And I was dealing with that, you know. And well, I can't. Well, let me reach out to a friend. And so I'm scrolling through my phone. Well, he don't like to know more. I haven't heard from them in a long time. I done made them mad, you know, and I got to the point I was like, I don't have anybody but my wife. You know, I cause issues with my own family. I cause issues with my friends. I cause issues with my wife's family. All wonderful people. For what? And I remember, I think it was March 19th this year, my wife, she left to with her friend. She sells makeup on the side, and she went to like St. Charles for a convention, whatever. So it was March 19th. I'm sitting out in the backyard, had a little bonfire or whatever, sitting there, and you know, I'm just sitting there and just going through my personal struggle, you know, thinking like, I don't have any friends anymore. My family hate me. You know, I hate my family. I don't have anybody, you know. And the thoughts in my head of suicide pops back up. And first thing I thought about was that pistol, that 38. I was like, well, I mean, I tried 2 times before. Maybe the third time be the charm. And I remember standing up. And I took a couple of steps. I'm like, well, I'm doing it. This is it. And my wife don't even know this. But I stood up. I'm like, I'm going to go up there and get it. I'm going to come back down here. Third time's a charm. And I'm on TikTok a lot, you know. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm on TikTok and, you know, just kind of scrolling through, just kind of keeping my hands busy, whatever, as in whatever. I take a couple steps and I scroll through TikTok and I think it was Exodus 14:14. It said, that Jesus will fight for you. You just only need to be still. You know, I don't know if that's the word for word or somebody personally put it on there, but that stopped me in my tracks. It stopped me in my tracks. I didn't go up there. I didn't get it. Sat back down and I just sat there and just, you know, but once sometimes you on TikTok or Facebook or whatever, you watch one thing in the algorithm, that's the only thing you see. So I'm over here just seeing spiritual quotes and left and right, and I'm thinking like, why is this? Why am I seeing so much of this stuff on my TikTok? But I kept on seeing Exodus 14:14. Jesus will fight for you. You just only need to be still. I've always had people love me, but I've never felt like anybody would fight for me. I feel like the only person that truly fought for me and will give their life for me is my wife. I don't know. The best way I can explain it is if there is 1,000 people in this room and everyone's talking this and that and use their this and that. My wife needs to, only thing she needs to do is come up, do this, and it's just quiet. She's my, she is my peace. And what's sad about it, whenever I wanted to go upstairs and get that gun, I didn't think about her not 1 second, which I'm gonna be, I'm shameful of that. But, you know, I kept on seeing stuff on TikTok, more quotes and spiritual quotes, and I've never really gotten the Bible, so I couldn't tell you if it's somebody just their own personal quotes or if it's really in the Bible. Some of the stuff I've seen that I, know is like, yeah, it's a real thing. The words are different, but I just, started opening up more, and I remember years ago, um, we went to church at First Baptist Church in Sedalia. I went with my friends, and of course, I went to play basketball on Wednesday nights. That was my excuse to go to church. Well, the youth pastor there was Francis O'Donnell. Amazing man. Amazing man. Once he found out with my friend passing away, he tried his best to open me up. And I was just like a brick wall. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. But he should try and try. He wasn't overbearing or nothing like that. He didn't scare me off, but he's just a very awesome person. You know, the smile it's just stowed in my brain. Bless his heart, man. He's just an awesome person. But we used to do songs, 3 or 4 songs every night, and I was like, oh, let me get through these songs so I can go out there and play basketball, and I'm like, well, I'm doing it here. Well, there's one song that just, they started playing, and it was a song that it hit so many radio stations, that I've realized, it was a very popular song. I can only imagine, Mercy Me. And I remember that song. It just he played that song, and just like every Wednesday that I used to go, they used to play that song, and I'm over here just like slowly come up. I think it started with my foot tapping and my head bobbing, and then I'm looking up there and I'm reading the words, whatever. And then Frank's is like, see, I know I get you to open up a little bit. And I'm like, it's just that song. I don't know. That's an awesome song. That song's always stuck with me. And they made a movie. I watched the movie once, with my wife, and of course I teared up, and it was an awesome movie, great movie. Well, fast forward back to time whenever I was, that night at the bonfire, I was gonna, go upstairs and get the gun, March 19th, whenever she got back was I think Saturday night or Sunday. We ended up Sunday or that Monday, or no, it was, I forget. I mean, it was around that time. I can't tell you dates, whatever, but we rewatched that movie. And I don't know what it was, but I remember sitting in my chair. I put my hood up. My wife's next to me right here, and our niece that lives with us was over there. And I remember putting my hood up, and, not just whatever. I just put it up, but the whole time I'm watching this movie, it just hit different. Just like I'm just the whole movie. I'm just, just crying. Just like, and I feel like what I got from the movie is He thought his dad was the biggest monster that he could ever imagine, you know, but he changed there at the end, through the help of Jesus. His dad changed his life, and I remember one of the parts of the movies where he's just like, yeah, son. It's like, I heard you. I heard you sing. And it's just like, he's like, what do you mean? He's kind of like, you heard me? He goes, yeah, I turned the radio on and I heard you sing, and the son's like, wow, but it's just that that movie kind of opened me up a little bit. And I remember reaching out to Francis and I told Francis, like, man, told him about the movie, whatever, and told him, kind of thanked him for, trying, back when I was younger, but it's time. I'm not fighting this anymore. I'm like, Jesus was, never with me, and March 29th or March 28th, that Saturday, um, uh, I was telling, or my wife asked me, so would Francis ever text you back or wrote you back? I'm like, yeah. I was like, but I mean, I know he's a busy man and, whatever, but like, how do you feel about just going up there on Sunday? And she's like, yeah, let's do it, And so we just got up early, and me and my wife, of course, we went to the one on Nolan. We went in there in an empty parking lot. And normally empty parking lot, I'm like, well, let's just go get something to eat and let's go shopping or something. And I remember looking at her and I'm like, well, look up, there's another one. I forget where it is. And she looked up, it's like in Blue Springs. I'm like, we're going to that. She's like, well, you want to go? And I'm like, yeah, I want to see Francis, and hopefully he has to be there. Francis has to be there. And she's like, well, I'm just happy to go to church. I'm not going to miss church this Sunday. And I just, I wanted to come to church, but I wanted to see Francis. You know what I'm saying? And so we come up here, and for one of the first times, I remember walking in this church. It was that back parking lot coming down where I think where you all had school, coming up the stairs, whatever. But the first time walking this church, I just felt like I belonged. I ain't never stepped a foot in any church where I felt like I belonged. Um, I remember coming up and um, we just kind of came in and we sat down and we sat down whatever. And then they were just getting done. Somebody was coming out of I think the water or whatever. And I'm thinking like that's what I want. I want to get baptized because the whole journey of this setting off is like, oh, if I get baptized, then that's everything I need. That's gonna fix everything, And at the time, I was like, I didn't realize there's more to it, Um, I remember jumping up, and I remember coming out here and be like, um, I want that, and I forget what her name was. Um, nice lady. Um, my wife was here. She would remember her name, and I remember her husband came up too, and but as soon as I came up to her, I was just, and I'm over here kind of like the tears hadn't rolled on yet. She's like, "Can I help you?" I'm just like, "Where's Francis O'Donnell at?" And she's like, "What?" And I kind of like, "Well, he's a work at First Baptist in Sedalia, and he's a youth pastor there, and I came up here to see him." And he's like, "Well, he's not here. He's doing an online church today. He's at his daughter's house, working on his house." And I'm like, that's when I was like, I need I need to get baptized. They're doing it in there. That's what I want. And she just kind of like gave me a hug, and then her husband came up, and my wife came out from sitting down, whatever, and and I forget what his name was, but he's like, well, you know, let me call Francis, and he got Francis on the phone, and of course, Francis, nicest guy in the world. He's like, well, I'm sorry I couldn't be there. And I'm like, it's I feel like it's different now. You don't have to be here, but you know, um, I remember. well, it was like, I talked to Francis a little bit, and he's like, well, you still have time to go back in there and get to the service, whatever. And Nate, Pastor Nate, was pastoring, and I never told him that, but he looks like Josh Hartlett's brother. If anybody's ever seen that, not for I got bad eyes, so the whole time I'm sitting up here and I'm just like thinking, I'm like, this guy looks like Josh Hartlett, the actor. You know what I'm talking about? It looks just like my eyes like I know that's not him, but it's Josh Hartlett up there talking. But like everything he's saying is just you know, I wasn't so naive to any of the words that before I was sitting there and just like, oh, a few more songs I can get out of here, this and that. I'm just standing up there. I'm just emotional. A lot of stuff he was saying, I didn't understand what he was saying, but it was just like, there was just something inside of me that just like, before that day, I just felt like a few days before that, I felt like some of my anger and, my depression was just, I didn't think about it then, but it was just kind of going away, you know. And then for some reason, I just felt like, man, I need to reach out to some of my friends and family to ask, not not forgo them, tell them they need to forgive me, but I need to tell them, hey, please forgive me, Then Sunday coming here, I'm standing up, just very emotional, and get through the service, whatever, and like Pastor Nate said, we're going to have some people down here, if you're ready and if you think it's time, come up here, and if you're ready to give your heart to Jesus and be forgiven for your sins, and I've had a lot of sins I've done, but I remember just standing there and just thinking, you know, and I remember looking at my wife and she kind of like, she knew, like deep down in her heart. And I'm just kind of standing there and it's like thinking, I stood there for a few seconds and I took that first step myself, but it kind of like something had just go ahead. And I remember that first couple steps, I'm just bawling, just just hysterical, just up there, and it could happen with any of those people up there. But I locked eyes with Danny, and I beat line straight to him, and I just, um, I'm like, what do I do? And he told me like two or three times what to say, I'm just like, what? Like, tell me one more time, you know? And he's like, well, we're gonna just get on your knees and kneel down, and I'm like, you're gonna have to help me down. I got a herniated disc, but and at the time I would before that I would not get on my hands and knees, because my back was hurting so bad. But I'm like, you're gonna have to help me. But all right, I remember doing it and just kind of. I mean, I felt like before I even kneeled down and you know and asked Jesus to come in my heart and forgive me for my sins. I just felt like I just felt something inside me before I even did that. That finally that this whole time that Jesus was. Well, I thought that he didn't care, and even the words I used, I cursed his name, said some awful things. That he was never with me, but the whole time he was with me the whole time. And to fast forward now, Jesus he has a plan for everybody. I'm just now figuring out what my plan is, and I still got a long ways to go. But from the March 29th till what's the April 14th, I can honestly sit here and tell you that I haven't thought about or I haven't really dealt with my depression, which I've had my whole life. I felt like I had depression before Bruce died in '97, just because my dad wasn't there. I was just like, oh, I got daddy issues, this and that. I feel like from the March 29th to now, I haven't dealt with my depression. I hadn't thought one time about suicide, and suicide has been in my head every single day since 1997. Every single day. But until March 29th till April 14th, right now, I have read more, even though I found a large print Bible, the King James version, the old version. My wife warned me beforehand. She's like, "You need to get a new version. You're not going to understand anything in it." I'm like, well, it's large print. I want it, you know. So I've never been more excited to get anything in the mail. I remember getting that book, and I got these wooden crosses, like the little crosses right here. And you can kind of put your thumb in it for people who fidget a lot. And I remember I ordered those myself, and my wife ordered me the large print King James Version Bible. And we were sitting at the house, and I think it was a Monday, and she was talking to her mom because we still get some of our mail. Her mom's in Tipton, and she's like, "Yeah," it's like, "Hey, did we get my that bill in the mail?" And she's sitting next to me, whatever. And I can hear her mom say, "Yeah, and you also looks like you got a book, and Paul got something else." I'm like, "Wait," I'm like, "Is that my Bible?" And she's like, "Yeah, I think so." And I'm like, "Well, tell your mom to open them up and see if that's the wooden crosses too." And she's like, "Open." But yeah, I'm like, "I'm gonna go get that right now." And it was already like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. She's like, "Well, let's get it tomorrow." I'm like, "No, I need to get that now." I have never been more excited to pursue this. And I'm a horrible reader, but from that time we got that, I remember driving there, just and that's the first time I listened to K Love radio station. My wife always on her radio in her car. But I took her car, and I remember every time I get in, like I'm switching it to country station. I remember listening all the way up there, and that song came on. That just like I feel like I don't know. I mean, I believe in signs and kind of like, oh, whatever. But I can only imagine came on the way up there. So I'm thinking like I cranked that up, and I'm just like screaming it, thinking like I'm like, yes, this is everything's happening the way it should, And I'm just like, why haven't I done this long ago? Why have I been fighting this for so long? Um, but I remember getting that, coming home, so excited, and this and that, and I hadn't read that much, but I saw some on TikTok, and it shows you that their opinion which way you should read. Starting the Bible. I started Genesis a couple times, and it's just hard to read. And he's like, "We'll start with John first, and get through John." I forget what is next, whatever. But I've maybe 2 3 more pages left of John. But that's now I'm not even kidding you. Elementary to middle school to high school, I was the poster child of this kid ain't gonna read a word of anything. I didn't read anything. They say, well, go to the library, pick out 2 books. I picked out Where's Waldo and picture books. You know what I'm saying? I never read. I can read, but it's not that good. But I've read so far since I got that Bible. This is the most I've ever read in my life, but it's been out of the Bible, which I'm so proud of. You know what I'm saying? I've never been more proud of whatever. You know what I'm saying? I remember I've been out of work for 3 months, and I was horrible. I'm the funny guy at work. Those more of the not appropriate jokes. I made a lot of people uncomfortable. Blah blah. But you know, I remember I was excited going to work. Like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm doing great. I'm like, well, how's your back? I'm like, my back sucks. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, why do you say you're doing great? I was like, I'm gonna tell you, I found Jesus. And they're like, what? Like they look at me like, what? Like you of all people? I'm like, I found Jesus. And I'm like, could be more happy. And there's a few people that are religious people, and they're just like, they're could be more happier. But uh, it's just I just sometimes, I just can't at this point in my life, or I the road that I've been on has been dark and you know windy, just kind of like just horrible clouds. You know, like a lot of people hate the rain, but I know a lot of people who hate the rain, whatever it's, whenever that rain starts going sideways, that's when you really hate the rain. And I feel like that road has always been, you know, dark, windy, and that sideways rain. Just kind of like, oh, this stuff sucks. But now I just feel like the road that I'm on is I'm looking forward to see what's next turn. You know, I want to understand it more. I'm just I used to look at people like church people and be like, what a wacko, But now I'm just like, shame on me for ever thinking that. You know what I'm saying? And that woman that stopped me from going to church, I've prayed for her a lot. You know what I'm saying? Maybe she just, and I was thinking like, hey, she was having a bad day. Maybe maybe whatever. But
Good question. 60 seconds. Can you explain the excitement that you have? Because this video is going to be shown right before your baptism.
oh,
So you're going to be getting in the tub as this video is playing. So like even if you want to give yourself, even just to hear your own voice, um, uh, like why is it exciting for you?
I would tell you that what's most exciting is the support and the love that I've got from everybody. I feel the love of Jesus. I feel it. I mean, I feel it. Um, but the number one person that I gotta thank, and I mean, is this where I gotta thank my wife. She's if she's probably really embarrassed right now, but if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be sharing these words with you. Um, I just want to say thank you. Um, and if you see people like me, a lot of tattoos, we're not all that bad. But my wife, thank you for my wife. She has been a great, great person. She's led me to this, helped me lead me to this point. So I just, I'm just, I'm just so happy. So
I want to ask you one more. You shared a lot with me. I appreciate you.
yeah.
What if same way you did on Gathering Sunday, you walked in, saw people getting baptized, said I want that. What if somebody walks in on Sunday and you're in the tub and they've walked through all sorts of things in life? What would you tell them about Jesus and why they should get baptized?
What I'll probably do is, I don't want to make anybody mad, but I'll probably get out of that water and dripping wet, probably go up there and be like, hey, can I give you a hug first? And tell them, like, hey, the more you stop fighting it and just open your heart, you know what I'm saying? Open the doors and kind of like let it in, you know what I'm saying? But if I've heard stories of if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody, and it's like you see miracles happen all the time, and sometimes it doesn't happen. You know what I'm saying? Like it kind of goes back to why they take Bruce. Like how come he couldn't save Bruce? But this is my miracle right now. So I can sit here and tell you that I'm saved. I got a bright future ahead of me. But I just got to thank God for that. That's. But I'm looking forward to. You know, I don't want to be one of those people that let me. This is gonna be a shiny, a shiny toy. I'm gonna lose interest. Ain't no losing nothing. I can't wait to tell more people, and and like people or anybody, anybody deserves the those words, but mainly for people who look like me, a lot of people get judged, unfortunately, and so maybe somebody can see my story, and you know, I got tattoos everywhere, and maybe somebody who looks like me can see this, and they can help them. I just watched a video where a guy, he was involved in church, and he had multiple sclerosis. I can't say that right, but he was already in a wheelchair, barely walk. One eye was completely blind, and he can see like a sliver of a light. And the show was called Miracles. And whenever he came up, you can watch it on video where he just kind of grabs the guy's arm and just kind of he's looking around, and he's like, "Do you see that?" And he's going through his story. He's like, "There's flags back there," and the guy's like, "What flag do you see first?" He goes, "That's the American flag." And the miracle was that he got saved. But and I'm thinking like, I'm doing all right. There's people out there that deserve it more than me, but I've been saved. My miracles has happened. So I'm just looking for the future. Can't wait. And thank you for everybody at this church. This is our second family here, so you're going to be seeing a lot of us. So thank you, and amen to amen to everybody, and the love everybody has here. Um, to say thank you.